At a $1 million wedding, where the gowns outshone the lights and every raised glass reeked of power, a woman walked in, wearing a plain linen dress and faded flats. No one knew her name. All they knew was that she didn't belong. She wore no diamonds, no designer labels draped across her body, and she didn't bow at the right moments. And for them, that was enough to laugh. They called her a drifter, an uninvited guest, a joke in the middle of this dazzling celebration. They threw wine on her dress, live-streamed her humiliation, and convinced themselves they were teaching her a lesson about class. What they didn't expect was that the real lesson was waiting for them. Because this woman hadn't just shown up with an invitation. She came with a truth that the entire room had tried to bury. She didn't need anyone to defend her. She didn't scream for justice. She just stood tall, and in a silence so heavy it could crush you, she became the reason everyone else lowered their heads. This wasn't revenge. It was a declaration of dignity. And if you've ever been judged by how you look, if you've ever been excluded simply because you didn't fit their mold, then this story is yours. Crystal-studded haute couture gowns shimmered under gleaming baccarat chandeliers. On the banquet tables, 1990, Dom Perignon Vantage was being poured into engraved crystal glasses, each etched with the name of a guest. White orchids imported from Ecuador arched into a 3-meter-tall floral gate. Beneath the polished Italian marble floors were Louboutin heels, pacing the steps of tycoon supermodels and Europe's upper crust. They raised their glasses, laughed, and live-streamed every moment of what was being hailed as the wedding of the century, a symbol of status and power. And then she walked in, a woman in a loose mint-green linen dress. No logos, no satin lining. No one was trailing behind her to adjust her hem. Her flats were slightly worn. Her hair wasn't curled or styled, just loosely clipped back with a scratched metal barrette. In her hand, a cream-colored invitation card with silver trim, like a silent note in a symphony of ostentation. She didn't need anyone to announce her. She didn't lift her chin to meet their eyes. She simply walked step by step, slowly, steadily. But this place had no room for those who didn't glitter. A sharp oops cut through the air as red wine splashed across her dress. "Oh, sorry," a cold voice followed. "I thought you were one of the waitstaff." Laughter erupted louder than the violins on stage. Someone filmed it. Someone nudged the person next to them with a sneer. A napkin was tossed at her feet, not to help her clean up, but to humiliate her. But she didn't bow her head. She simply picked up the napkin, dabbed away the stain, and stood up straight, as if not a single soul in that gold-plated room deserved even the slightest tilt of her posture. People saw a woman being humiliated in the present, but what they didn't see was how radiant her past once was. Before Rothwell Beauty graced the cover of Forbes, before the name Vanessa Rothwell became a global icon, in the beauty industry, there was once a tiny dorm room, a dim yellow desk lamp, and a young woman mixing formulas by hand through sleepless nights. Her name was Sophie Lane. She was the one who created the original formula, the one who spent night after night surrounded by the scent of jojoba oil and hyaluronic acid. She was the heart and the brain behind the brand that once revolutionized the world of green cosmetics. But everything crumbled after she gave birth. Complications from postpartum recovery forced her to step away. And Vanessa, her best friend, the one who once swore they'd rise together, used that absence to seize it all. In a private meeting Sophie was never invited to, and the board was convinced she had become a liability. Vanessa rebranded the company, rebuilt the website, and erased Sophie's name from every legal document. All of it was done within 2 months. When Sophie returned, the same people who once shook her hand now turned their backs. She was no longer allowed to enter headquarters. She had no legal right to sign anything. And in the darkest moment of that betrayal, it was Vanessa who sent her a message. You were once part of it, but now the brand needs someone more. Fitting. A sentence like a blade, one that lodged itself in Sophie's memory and twisted endlessly. But Sophie didn't reply. She held her baby daughter close, stepped out of the spotlight, and began again. Not to reclaim fame, but to wait for the right moment. A moment like tonight. Sophie's silence didn't make them stop. It only emboldened them. A man in a tuxedo, swirling a martini in his hand, approached her table. He leaned in and said with a smirk, "Excuse me, could you get me another? I seem to have spilled mine." Then he deliberately let the olive fall onto her dress, watching it roll down like a purposeful stain. Next to him, a woman in a feathered hat let out a loud laugh, casually tossing a napkin at Sophie's feet and saying, "Wipe that up, would you? You're ruining the aesthetic of the evening." Phones were raised non-stop. A drone camera zoomed in from above, capturing the wine-stained fabric and the olive mark in high definition. Online comments swarmed in like bees to a target. But Sophie said nothing. She simply folded the napkin neatly and placed it on the table. Then, she looked up straight into the eyes of the man who had just humiliated her. Her gaze wasn't angry. It wasn't fragile. It was still like the surface of water before a storm. That look made him freeze for a second. A woman nearby, just about to make a cruel remark, suddenly hesitated. No one could explain why this woman, in a simple linen dress, saying nothing, doing nothing, could make an entire room shift from mockery to discomfort. Then the event's MC walked on stage, microphone in hand, as if about to kick off the next round of entertainment. He looked at Sophie, grinned ear to ear, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a rather unique guest tonight. Who would have thought someone would show up in such a bold thrift shop ensemble?" A few scattered laughs. Some clinked their glasses in an attempt to steer the energy back to safety. But Sophie's silence made that impossible. She didn't take her eyes off the stage. She didn't bow her head. She didn't back down. And right then, something happened that no one in that crowd saw coming. The violins still played flawlessly, but no one was really listening anymore. All eyes were on Sophie, the woman with no designer dress, no flawless makeup, no sparkling jewelry to earn the crowd's approving nods. They didn't care who she was. To them, she was simply out of place, and that alone made her a target. A man with a crooked red bow tie stood up, raised his glass as if to make a toast, and shouted, "It's amazing how you had the courage to walk in here without even pretending to be rich." Laughter exploded. A woman wearing sunglasses indoors tilted her head, pointed her phone directly at Sophie's face, and said, "Smile for me. I need a thumbnail for tonight's live stream." Title: Woman Lost Among the Elite. Sophie didn't look away. She didn't smile either. She simply stared into the lens, her eyes calm, deep, and steady, as if saying something the camera would never be able to capture. Near the stage, a group raised their champagne glasses toward her and called out, to the bravery of the uninvited guest. That line was the final snip, cutting through whatever fragile restraint still lingered in the room. Everyone laughed. Everyone thought they were right, except for one person. Sophie. She slowly stood up. No rush, no trembling. She gently brushed the red-stained section of her dress, adjusted the cream invitation card on the table, and began walking toward the stage, where the MC was still babbling about social etiquette. Just a few steps away, she stopped. Her voice wasn't loud, but each word was sharp and clear. I heard everything you said. About my dress, about my shoes, about my presence. But not one of you asked the only question that matters. Why was I invited? The room fell silent for a moment. The spotlight beamed directly onto Sophie's face, as if unintentionally handing her the true role of the evening's host. A voice called out from the back row, "Maybe she knows someone in the kitchen." Laughter followed, but this time it wasn't so confident. Sophie tilted her head and replied, "If I do know someone in the kitchen, at least I know the value of honest labor, unlike you who surround yourselves with people building fake stages and then convince yourselves it's the top of society." This time, no one responded, because every word she spoke wasn't a rebellion. It was a mirror reflecting back the shallowness of the entire room. Sophie stepped back. She didn't take the stage. She didn't fight for the spotlight. She simply sat down again. But now her silence was no longer mistaken for weakness. It had become something else, a threat, a signal, and everyone in the room began to feel that something was coming. Sophie stepped onto the stage amidst a crushing silence. No more violins, no more smug glances, just hundreds of eyes tracking every step of the woman they had so ruthlessly mocked only moments ago. Her mint green linen dress still bore the red wine stain. But now, no one dared to laugh at it. She approached the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and lifted her head. Her voice rang out not loud, but each word landed with the clarity of a bell echoing through an empty temple. "Thank you all for giving me a night I'll never forget. Thank you for helping me realize something, that true worth isn't measured by shoes dress labels or how gracefully you raise a glass. I didn't come here to attract attention. I came because I was invited, legally rightfully invited, though many of you chose to ignore that. I am the co-founder of Rothwell Beauty, the one who wrote the original formulas, the one who hand-mixed serum batches in a 10-square-meter apartment. I'm the person you erased, the name you forgot, the one you ridiculed, but I never disappeared. I simply stepped back and waited for the right moment." Some in the crowd looked ready to respond, but when Sophie's eyes swept across the room, no one dared speak. She went on, steady, uninterrupted. "You think you're celebrating a victory tonight, but in truth, you're attending a ceremony built on the intellect and labor of someone else. I don't need anyone to stand with me. I don't need applause. I only needed to stand up just once and speak the truth. Today, I've done that." She gave a small nod, turned, and walked off the stage. No one clapped, because no applause could be honest enough to undo the mistake the entire room had just made. Sophie didn't need them. She only needed to stand tall, and she did. Sophie stood on the stage, wrapped in a heavy silence. No more laughter. No more condescending glances. The linen dress stained with red wine no longer diminished her. It made her stand out more than anyone in the room. She stood at the microphone, eyes sharp, voice calm yet resounding. "Thank you for giving me a night to remember. I didn't come here to beg for a place at your table. I came because I had every right to be here. I am the one who built Rothwell Beauty from a room barely 10 square meters wide, the one who wrote the formulas, the one who created the product, and then had my name erased simply because I stepped back to become a mother. You thought I would disappear, but today I stand here not asking for fame, not demanding apologies. I just needed one moment to speak the truth, and I've done that." Sophie turned to leave, not waiting for applause. She didn't need it. She only needed to stand tall. And she did. The moment Sophie stepped off the stage, the silence shattered, and what followed was a chain reaction no one could stop. Vanessa still stood there, gripping the microphone, her face pale, her eyes filled with panic. Julian, the man who once held her hand as they walked down the aisle, walked straight up to her, removed the engagement ring from his finger, and placed it on the table without a single word more. "You've lied too much. From now on, there's nothing left between us." Messages flooded Vanessa's phone. Urgent alerts from the executive board, notifications from brand partners announcing their withdrawal. A company once praised as a symbol of female empowerment had now become the epicenter of a PR disaster. Social media turned on her within minutes. Posts that once praised Vanessa vanished. The photos mocking Sophie were now being reshared, but with new captions: cruel, fake, toxic. The influencers who had filmed themselves laughing at Sophie couldn't escape the backlash. They lost sponsorships, their posts were taken down, and campaigns were cancelled. The very videos they had uploaded for entertainment had become evidence used against them. As everything collapsed like dominoes, Sophie didn't say a word. She simply stood beside Damien, her expression calm, not angry, not triumphant, just steady, like someone who had always known this day would come. In the room that had once echoed with applause and arrogant laughter, there was now only awkward silence and regret. The woman they had looked down on was the only one still standing, and those who once sat on gilded pedestals could no longer lift their heads. As the evening faded beneath the weight of silence, as the lights no longer shimmered like they did at the beginning, and the music became nothing more than distant wandering notes, Sophie and Damien stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out over the sea. The wind from the cliffs carried the scent of salt and the air of freedom. Below, a helicopter waited on the lawn, its blades turning slowly as if it too was waiting for a worthy ending. Sophie didn't rush to leave. She turned her gaze drifting back to the ballroom behind her, the room where laughter and mockery had once turned her into a spectacle, simply because she didn't wear a designer gown or carry the polished facade of the wealthy. Now those same people sat with lowered heads, not out of fear, but shame. Damien tilted his head, his voice low, asking a question he had held back all evening. "You didn't have to do all of this." Sophie looked at him. Her eyes held no anger, no exhaustion, only the calm of someone who had endured so much pain and still never lost sight of who she was. "I didn't do it to be recognized. I did it to reclaim the truth. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been pushed out of this room, silently erased from nameplates, judged simply because they didn't fit the mold set by the many." She looked down at her hands. The same hands that had once mixed batches of cream held her daughter when no one else was there, knocked on doors, begging for a chance, and now reached for Damien's hand as she stepped forward. As they walked toward the helicopter, no one dared say a word. No more laughter, no more whispers, only the quiet stares of a crowd who had just realized they mocked the wrong woman. Sophie didn't walk away to leave them behind. She walked away to remind them that truth doesn't need glitter to carry weight. Justice doesn't need to shout to silence a room. And pride, when held upright, can make an entire world lower its head in silence. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part wasn't the insults, but how an entire room could so easily turn its back on someone just because her appearance didn't fit their expectations. But Sophie Lane showed us something else. That truth doesn't need glitter to carry weight. That dignity doesn't need noise to be recognized. And that justice, even when delayed, can still be powerful enough to silence a whole world. The lesson here isn't just about the resilience of a woman pushed out of the very company she co-founded. It's in how she chose to face it. She didn't beg, she didn't scream, she didn't seek revenge. She simply stood tall, looked each person in the eye who once laughed at her, and let the truth speak for itself. In a society where people are too often judged by the logos on their clothes or the number of followers they have, this is a clear reminder a person's value isn't in how they appear, but in how they hold themselves steady in the moments when everything tries to break them. I believe all of us at some point have been doubted, dismissed, or pushed to the sidelines simply because we didn't fit the mold. And if you're in that place right now, please remember you don't need to become someone else. You just need to stand your ground, because one day the truth will stand with you. If this story moved, you leave a comment, share your feelings, and don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story so you never miss another story that stirs your heart and inspires your soul. Every time you follow, you help breathe new life into stories that deserve to be remembered. Thank you for listening.